Hey everyone, I'm excited. This week I am talking to someone who grew up in foster care. Her name is Aliscia Brorman, and I met her while volunteering for Foster Love here in Los Angeles. Fostering children and adopting is something that I am very passionate about and I gravitate towards. So I was so excited to talk to someone who's been through the system. And Alicia's story, warning, there might be some trigger points of sexual abuse, abandonment, things like that. So I want to give a heads up. But also through all the trauma, and she'll say it in the episode, how she's created this upbeat persona through survival because it was the only way she felt that she could be heard. For those who are not familiar with the foster system, some things that these programs do is they'll give suitcases or brand new duffel bags to the agencies because when these kids get pulled from their homes, they are usually given just a trash bag to put their belongings. So organizations like Foster Love, they're big about dignity and giving these kids dignity while going through the process and also somewhat of a childhood. For example, my husband Pete and I, we volunteered for something called Disney Days, where they reunite siblings because the majority of the time when kids get put into foster care, the siblings get put into different homes. So a lot of times these kids grow up not knowing their siblings. So Disney Days is a day that they reunite siblings and let the kids have a little bit of fun. One more thing I want to mention before the podcast starts, because this is how I fund my podcast through affiliates like this. Strong Coffee Company. I drink this coffee almost every single day. I love it. I would not promote anything that I myself do not love. My personal favorite flavor is cacao. And if you'd like a little discount, 15% off, use code Christine Chang at checkout. Welcome to the Show Up with Christine Chang podcast. I'm so excited. Today I have Aliscia Brorman on the podcast. She is a public speaker, a real estate investor, entrepreneur, founder of Full Circle, and foster care advocate. Thank you for coming on the show.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited.
Yes, I'm really excited for this conversation because I have not felt connected to something. We're going to talk a lot about growing up in foster care and adoption and how that impacts growing up and personal relationships. And Aliscia and I met at Disneyland, actually, on the teacups.
Literally on the teacups.
On the teacups. We were volunteering that day for Foster Love.
Yes.
And actually, can you talk a little bit more about Foster Love? Because that was my first time volunteering with them.
Yeah, of course. So Foster Love, I was actually a part of their family fellowship program that they have. So they do so many things. Like, honestly, if I sat here and list all of them, fosterlove.com, go look it up. And there's tons of options. But their main, their overarching idea is that there was a problem. And the problem is that the foster system in America is broken. And the solution is that they are just throwing out anything that they can. So we're replacing trash bags with suitcases. We're making sure that we're giving the gift of childhood back to these children through bikes and skateboards and all kinds of fun stuff, making sure they have birthday boxes for their birthday. There's a plethora of things that they do. One of the other things they do that I was involved with and how I kind of got integrated was the family fellowship. So they provide scholarship opportunities for former foster youth to essentially succeed because less than 3% of foster youth graduate from college. And so what they're doing is they're providing more than just, here's a check, good luck. It's mentorship, it's guidance, it's counseling, it's therapy, it's family. It's literally a family fellowship. None of us spend holidays alone. We get flown out to Colorado for a retreat during Christmas time. So we get to spend what we, a lot of the times with many foster youth, end up spending alone for Christmas time because they don't have family to go home to. We get to go and be with our family, which is that of Foster Love. And so that's how I got started with them. And then I've come full circle. And so now I do a lot of their advocacy events. So I'm flying around and helping build those sweet cases, helping, showcase, bring a story to light of who you're impacting whenever you're building a skateboard or building a bike and who it's going to, and getting to bring all of that to life and rally the troops is what I keep saying, because I feel like it's going to take a village to do what needs to be done. But Foster Love has been pivotal in my life, and now I'm pouring back into them just as much because I wouldn't be here without them. They are amazing and they're doing amazing work. And obviously Disney Days. Oh my gosh, I forgot Disney Days. Like that is okay. So 80% of foster youth are separated from their siblings when they go and enter into the foster system. So I was actually separated from my siblings as well. So Disney days, this was my first Disney days as well, girl. So it was
So
meant to be
fun.
kismet. And so I had experienced Disney with foster love and my family fellowship, but getting to see these children, knowing what they had been through, walking in their shoes preemptive to that, and like seeing, like even within our group that we had when we were doing the ice cream moment where we get to surprise them. Yes. I don't know if you remember, but there was a little girl there and she was the oldest and her sibling was really thirsty. And so she came up to me and she said, "Ma'am, I don't want an ice cream. Can I get my little sister a water instead?" And I just saw myself so hard in that moment because I was that girl. I was that oldest who made sure that I went without so my siblings could have. And I was like, no, baby girl, you're getting 2 ice creams and she can still have her water, and getting to pour back into her and let her know, like, hey, you can still be a child and still love yourself while loving your siblings. Like just getting to have that full circle moment of like, hey, that was me, it was beautiful, but then getting to see all of their smiling faces because they're going through so much trauma and so much adversity. And then, of course, having our volunteers like you who show up and show out because y'all are also a big pivotal point because this is a ton of kids that you guys are like hurting around Disneyland and like still have a good time, but be safe. And
yes.
But it's a beautiful moment where all these siblings get to come back together and just be reunited and have a beautiful day. You got to see that firsthand. So I'm sure that was huge for you too.
It was. I get teary thinking about it. And, sometimes you connect with, 1 or 2 kids, and there was someone special. And I think about her all the time. For anyone who doesn't know, you're not allowed to know anything about these kids for good reasons. So I don't know, where she lives or anything like that. We're not allowed to keep in touch. So it just forces you to kind of be present and, just wish them the best. But I had all the feels, and there is a connection there. Are you spiritual at all?
I am.
A little bit? Yeah.
Yes.
So I feel there is some sort of connection I have with this. And one time I saw a psychic, and you always take those things with a grain of salt, but she said something once that I resonated with, and I think she's right. She said, she's like, "I don't see you pregnant, but I see you with 2 kids." Mm. And then I was just like, I think you're right.
Oh, girl, I got chills. Yes.
Yeah, so I feel like it's one of those things when you know.
Yes.
But discovering foster love and doing volunteering for Disney Days was my husband and I. It was our first time being exposed to that and the kids. And I really loved it. And I loved meeting you. And I loved that you grew up in foster care, and you were adopted once at age 9 and again at
14.
At 14.
At 16.
Oh,
so
at 16.
I was placed with the family at 14, and then we finally adopted at 16. Yes, girl.
At 16. So you've lived it. So I love hearing that because you told me something like Disney Days with Reunited the Siblings. You said that would have helped me a lot if I had experienced this younger. And sometimes with the volunteering and things, I feel like sometimes you don't know, like is this helping them or not? And hearing that from you made me feel really great about everything.
Honestly, that's like one of the biggest reasons that I've kind of come full circle and started working with foster love again, is because the impact that they're making is a direct, immediate change. And even with Disney Days, a lot of the times what can happen is all you're seeing is this. You're seeing smiles and happiness and joy. And it's like, that is so amazing to be able to give them that. But that is not where they came from prior to walking into Disney. Disney brings the smile onto the grumpiest Grinch there is, right? And so, yes, it is beautiful to get to see that part, but to remember what they're going through, what they actually experience, the trauma and adversity and trials they're going through every single day. You got to see the happiest part of it, but there is so much more to it. And so I think that bringing that to the forefront and making sure that, even with the events of the sweet cases, we had an event in New York that I just flew in from, and what I noticed was there were skateboards, which they were, limited edition Pokemon skateboards were amazing. And then there were sweet cases. And of course, who wouldn't want to build a skateboard? And so everybody's, sitting at the skateboards and the sweet cases are left to bay. And so whenever I began giving my presentation, which we start off just showcasing what foster love is, and I started telling my story and my portion of why I helped foster love and how they helped me, I talked about that moment and, whenever I was first pulled from my very first family, from my blood parents, and I was handed a trash bag, and how that was such a symbolic, pivotal moment for me in my life, because in that moment of turmoil where my siblings had already been taken to the foster shelter, I was sitting there begging to know, because they weren't my siblings. I had raised these. I was the oldest. I raised these children of mine because we were abandoned in the house for over a year. So these weren't my siblings that I'm asking about. I'm coming home to an empty house and saying, hey, where are my kids? Where are my children? Not where is my brother and my sister? And so when you're just handed a trash bag and told, hey, go pack 2 shirts, and three pairs of pants and 2 shirts, throw a personal item in there, throw it in the trash bag. It's like, wait, no, where's my kids? And so that trash bag was so pivotal for me. And then also moving from the next placement to the next placement, and always being handed that and being basically told this is what you're worth. And then getting to that placement, and then you're not digging through a suitcase. You're not digging through your dresser or your drawers. You're digging through a trash bag. Getting to tell that story and getting to see the energy physically be present and shift in every single person there. I kid you not, girl. By the end of it, people were coming up to me after they finished their skateboard. Hey, is there a sweet case I can do now? I mean, it just shifted entirely, because you're seeing that these aren't just normal children, but they are children. You also got to experience that at Disney. It's like, oh yes, they did go through some trauma, but this is just a sweet little angel who didn't ask for any of this, but getting to bring that story to light. And getting to see every single one of them go from, we're here because we're here, these are cool skateboards that we're building too. Oh, wait, I see it now. And wanting to and desiring, and then pouring their whole energy and their love into making this sweet case as their, and if sweet cases are just basically, we get to design and put sweet messages and drawings onto a pad. We put it onto the sweet case. So it's just like a travel duffel bag. And we pack it full with coloring books and colors and so it's a travel kit. So you got like a toothbrush and all the survival kit stuff. You get a blanket, and then the softest teddy bear you will ever have in your entire life. And getting to experience that, I tried to explain to them from the beginning that what they were that beauty, that love, that joy they were going to be giving to a foster child, as they were presented that instead of a trash bag, they were going to feel it at the end of it. As they're stuffing that bag, that they were going to feel just as happy, and that love was going to be transferred into that bag. And, of course, everyone's like, okay, of course we're going to feel good because we're doing good. But then to get to see it and witness it, it's like nothing else, which I'm sure you probably felt that at Disney, because absolutely. Walking in, I don't know what your expectation was, but I'm sure walking out, you're like, whoa.
Yes. Yeah. It was overwhelming. It was all the emotions, yes. All the emotions. By the end of the day, we were exhausted. we had 11 kids in our group, and we got the littles, so they were age 4 to 8.
Yes, the fun age.
They were fun, where they're actually still interested in you.
Yes, true.
Right. And at least that day, it seemed that they were... They still had that light about them. The one question, one girl, she was one of the older ones, she did say at one point, why do we have to be in the foster care program? And I didn't know how to answer that. I kind of deflected, and I just said, you're not having fun getting to come to fun events like Disneyland? And she said, but why do we have to be in the program? And someone else, one of the other volunteers, said, that's a really hard question to answer, but my heart in that moment,
yes.
broke, and I didn't know what to say. So they were getting to the age where they're starting to wonder and understand, what is this? Where I haven't had experience with the teens yet, but I'm sure as you get older, you start to understand this isn't by choice.
And the shift is so present. So I think for my story in particular, I started off in chaos. I was tossed around the foster system before I even remember, preempted to even being 2.
Okay. So yes, I would love to hear your story from the time that you enter the foster care system to being adopted.
Yes, we're going to fast track it, girl. But a book, my trilogy is coming. But for now, we're going to fast track it. Okay, because there's a lot of depth to it. But yes, I was tossed around the system from before the age of 2 several times. My parents were drug addicts, and so they did proceed to have more children. My brother, I'm the oldest, but my brother right below me was born having withdrawals from the methamphetamine that my mother had been partaking in while she was pregnant. So he had to go in and, they literally had to detox him as a newborn. And he was taken right off the bat, but then they proceeded to have 2 more children. And we were not necessarily adopted, but I say it was adopted 3 times, not 2, because my Nana took us in. And my Nana on my mother's side was a godsend. Absolutely was. She also had scoliosis like I did. And so she ended up passing away whenever I was 7. Of course, the stress, the turmoil, wanting to help her daughter, also taking care of her daughter's 3 children, knowing that one of them was taken, all of that bruised disease. It's scientifically proven, stress, bruised disease. Like she was just at her peak's end. But I kid you not, she prepared me in every way, shape, and form to step up and be a mom. So when she passed, and whenever my grandpa went into a state of depression and kind of abandoned us, I kind of knew what to do. I knew how to make. Listen, I don't know how we did it, and it's still my favorite meal to this day, but we survived off of cream of wheat. So malto meal and cream of wheat were our, go-tos. But I kept a less than 1-year-old, so very young toddler alive, as well as a 2-year-old.
How old are you?
At this point, I'm 7. Okay. Yes. So I'm 6 going on 7. And I essentially was still going to school. So I was riding my bike to school every morning because I've always been really bad at breaking rules. And in my mind, if I don't go to school, that's bad. So one day I forgot to lock the door behind me, and I used to come home during lunch. And so I would check on the kids, and I came home during lunch that specific day that I forgot to lock the door. And my brother had gotten out, my little brother, and was riding his bike out on the highway at this point, and a parole officer had found him and was, obviously the main question, where's your parents? And he's like, honest, 3-year-old, I don't know. And so they get to the house and they investigate, and no one's home. And that's whenever I just remember that day, rounding the corner on my bicycle and seeing nothing but flashing lights. Because a few months prior to this, my Nana had passed away in my arms. And so she fell over one day, drinking a glass of wine, watching Fear Factor. And I think her body just collapsed from all of the stress and everything that was going on. And so all I remember at that point was red, white, and blue was the sign of my Nana's death. And so that trigger point of at this moment, a few months later, I'm winding the corner and now I see red, white, and blue again. And all I can think of is one of my siblings have passed. And then I get there and I'm asking all these questions. And these are not my siblings. These are my children at this point. And I'm being denied, and I'm handed a trash bag and told to do this. And I'm being treated as a child whenever I was a very mature, grown woman and stuck in a 7-year-old body. And so we were taken to a group home. And so that was my first time remembering being in the foster system, because prior to that, I was just so young. We were placed in a group home with lots of other children, and the food scarcity was so real that we were very malnourished. And so I in particular had to give my food away to my siblings just so that way they could have enough food to eat. And I remember countless nights running out from just being beaten by the older girls, and running out to the night shift and begging for help and just being told, we'll fight back, and most of the time it was because, they were wanting to do sexual things to my younger brother, and I would have to intercede. And so then I would take the beating for it. And so it was just so much that happened in the group home structure, and especially this was in Oklahoma. And so it was just a very different system. We stayed there for quite a while until, of course, it was all 3 of us. And I, being a determined mother, was like, you're not taking my siblings. We're not splitting up. We're staying together. And so I fought like crazy. I developed some people would say manipulation. I'm going to say the gift of persuasion came about because my baby sister wasn't even 1 year old, and everybody loves babies. Mm-hmm. And so everyone wanted my little sister. And so I had to go and pour into these people and remind them, if you take her, you're taking her away from me, her oldest sister, you're taking her away from her brother. And so I was able to make sure that we stayed together long enough for a family member out of Texas to step up and say, we'll take all 3 of them. And so I went from a group home to a kinship placement. And so kinship placements are family. So it's just outside family members who decide to take them in. And they typically receive little to no funding or support from the state. They're just kind of thrown into it. Still very vital, still very important, but they're not foster families. So it's just a kinship placement. So this was my great aunt and great uncle. And we were put into an oasis. It was serenity. I mean, we were on acres of land and they had chickens and dogs in this big pool, and we had a plethora of food to eat, and it just seemed perfect. And everything was wonderful until they discovered my scoliosis. And so scoliosis is just like a curvature of the spine, and my back would hurt a lot. And so my great uncle began coming in every morning to rub my back, which is how it started, and then proceeded to rubbing the thighs and escalated pretty quickly to sexual abuse every day for about 5 years. And at that time, of course, I'm so used to giving my food away to my siblings so that way they can eat. I'm so used to putting everyone else above myself because it's all I knew. And I think at that pivotal age of learning and solidifying your programming, it made sense to me then, yes, I'm going to endure this abuse so we can have this oasis of a home and be happy and healthy and have enough food, and my siblings are fed and there's a roof over our head and we're together. And so I endured it for about 5 years. And then at the age of 13, things started to click for me. I started to mature even more so, thinking, hey, one day I'm graduating. My sister is going to be left alone. And so I did come out about the abuse to my aunt, who was also my mother, because they adopted us around when I was around 9. So that was my first official adoption, was by my aunt and uncle, and they were amazing. He was a federal officer. You know, they were cookie cutter family. She was a nurse. He was a federal officer. He preached at our local church very often. So just amazing, amazing people. And they were amazing people. He just had a secondary side to him. So when I came out about the abuse, my aunt, and who was my mother at the time, who had poured into me and loved me and showed me what love was and showed me the depth of love, unconditional love, despite me being her blood child, decided to become a jealous girlfriend instead of a protective mother. And so she turned against me. It turned into the entire concept of I was the promiscuous foster youth who was troubled and seeking attention, and that I was asking for it, and that I seduced him. Just all the things you can think of were just thrown out. And so I went about a year of enduring being rejected, being abandoned, my mom turning away and not protecting me in that moment, before I finally took it to the authorities. And by the time I took it to the authorities, I had been brainwashed so much. I'd been convinced that at that point that I had been, what is it called? Spiritual, like a demon had possessed me, and that I had come up with all of these thoughts and all of these memories, and that none of it was real. And they had really done their grooming on me. And so I decided to come out, and then we took it to court. And a lot of girls don't make it to that point, and I understand why more than ever, because let me tell you, he actually pled guilty to one account of indecency with a child, because he had several charges placed on him. And that was kind of his way out, so to speak. But at the age of 13, the district attorney at the time was basically telling me that I should take the plea deal that they were offering, because then I wouldn't have to go through the stress of court, or wouldn't have to deal with the scrutiny of the town, or being the talk of the town. And at that point, I had always put others above myself. And so my little sister was my main priority. I wanted to protect her at all cost. And so I was like, I'm not taking the plea deal. I don't know what to tell you. But at 13, I'm fighting with this grown man saying, no, I want to continue on with court. And we did. And he ended up pleading guilty to one account to lesser his sentence. But even though he pled guilty, I still felt that I was on trial. The trial itself was more difficult and more traumatic than the abuse, which is insane. They were bringing up posts from my MySpace, where I would post, I Can Make Your Bed Rock, because shout out to that song. It was really popular, and I love to dance and I love music, with no intention coming from me of being a sexualized person, more so just tweeting a lyric to a song that I liked. But just things like that to really dismay me. And then also when it comes to a trial, you have your side and, for my situation, my abuser's side, my entire family, my blood family had come in support of him, because they had convinced everybody and created this narrative of me that I was just this troubled foster youth seeking attention. And that's what everyone ran with. So on my side of the courtroom was just my foster family I was with and my boyfriend. And it was really hard to see that. And that's why I think that the trial was more traumatic than anything else. But I endured every single ounce of it because I wanted my sister to be safe and sound. And so moving forward, he did get sentenced with 10 years. And so we got our justice. He was released because that was around the time that the prisons were overcrowded in Texas, and they were releasing nonviolent offenders, which apparently a sexual abuser is a nonviolent offender. News to me. But he was released. And then the worst part of it was he was placed back into the home with my little sister. And despite everyone I asked or talked to or screamed at the top of my lungs to anyone, the answer was, well, in Howard County, he legally is allowed to live with her because she is his legal daughter. And that was really hard because I had went through all of that for her, to protect her. And so knowing that he had gotten out and got placed back into that home and knowing there was nothing I could do because the laws allow it was just really difficult. But at that point, I had my son, I had so many other things going on in life that I just had to accept that I did what I could do and keep it pushing and keep moving forward. But after the trial, I was put back into the foster system. So during that whole process, they did relinquish their rights to me as parents. And so at that point, I was tossed around from home to home, different people. My teacher was actually my first emergency placement. Then I was placed with the Brormans. And then an aunt and uncle from Yvette's side, or my mom's side, kind of stepped up and took charge and took me in, and they were amazing. But they had 3 boys. They didn't even really know how to deal with having a teenage girl. And it was just, so many things. And they did so amazing, and they poured into me as much as they could. And then ultimately, I had really bonded with my mom. With Christy, with the Brormans, I'd really bonded with her because she was feisty and she was stubborn, and she wouldn't really take, me not wanting to let her love me for an answer. It was just like, no, you're going to let me love you. Like, we're going to do this. And so I just connected with her. So I had actually asked to get placed back with the Brormans, and they took me back with open arms, and I showed up, and my younger brother, Luke, had actually put out rose petals all over my floor in my room and on my bed. He put roses, and I still have the note to this day. Like, I'm so glad you're back. I can't wait for you to be my sister. It was just so sweet and warm and welcoming, and at 14 going through all of this, I was ready to be emancipated. I'm like, hey, get me out of here. I'm over family. What is love? I thought I knew what love was. I'm confused. What is life? And so they didn't give me an option. They were like, hey, we're going to love you, and you can push away as much as you want, but we're going to give it to you. And so they were amazing. They poured into me. And then at 16, I finally put down my guard and was like, okay, let's do it. And so I became a Brorman. And that's a story that's not told very often. You don't hear 16-year-olds getting adopted because we do come with a lot of turmoil and a lot of strife and a lot of grief. But what's beautiful about it, and what they were able to recognize, is that they were able to see through that hurt and through that pain and know that love could bring me to a place that I needed to be. And so they, as well as every other angel in my path, because there were many of them, poured into me. And just like you were saying, you felt in that moment like these children, like just being able to be there and pour into them in that moment and being able to, for them to be able to receive it, that was everything to me. And especially going from different homes and seeing different religions and different cultures and different ways of parenting and ways of going from like a very strict Mexican household to a very German household that was a little bit more free flowing. And, it just was so intriguing to see, and thinking back, knowing that all of it has kind of created this version of me. So it's really a superpower.
Yes. I have questions.
Okay. Yes. Let's dive.
Okay. That was a lot of emotions there. And thank you so much for sharing that, because what I've seen when I met you a couple months ago, what I see is a woman who is very well adjusted. You're very friendly. And I noticed that about the children in our group too. They were very well adjusted because I think they're put in situations where you have to be. You're very well spoken. Aliscia was a cheerleader, by the way, in case you can't tell by her energy and her enthusiasm. You're a cheerleader through college, right?
Through high school, yes.
Through high school, okay.
Yes.
I'm wondering, did you go to therapy at all throughout when you were in foster care?
So I did have a court-appointed therapist, but this version of me that you see is the version of me I've been for a long time. And when I say that, I mean that my therapist basically saw that I was, a cheerleader and a national debater and percussion lieutenant and top of my class, and was just like, she's coping really well. She's doing really well. And then we would go in, and I'm very self-aware. I think because I had to grow up and be a mom at such an early age that I just kind of understand life a little differently because wisdom comes through experience. And so they were really good. Not they. I was really good at basically putting on this facade and being like, I know what I went through. I understand why I'm, feeling this way, but I'm going to succeed. I'm going to be successful. I'm not letting him determine my outcome of my life because we create the reality that we live that, yes, it wasn't my fault that he did that, but it's my responsibility. And so, like you said, I'm very well spoken. And for some therapists, from a kid, it's like, oh no, she's doing great. And so I do feel like I was written off. And we did get very limited hours because within foster care, whenever you're getting a court-appointed therapist, you only get a certain amount of hours. And they're so overwhelmed that if you get a kid that comes in and is doing amazing, it's like, well, hey, we need room for another kid who's not doing amazing. So I understand why they bypassed me in that time whenever I definitely needed it more than I understood. But I am in therapy now, and I'm a huge advocate for it for everybody. I'm actually about to be attending the Hoffman Institute. So I am so excited about that. I'm all for personal healing and growth and development because I thought I had this. I thought I had it under control because, hey, yeah, I went through that, but do you see everything I've done? Do you see everything I've accomplished? Do you see this? And it's like, oh, that wasn't healing. That was just a gold star that made me feel good at the time. So now we're circling back and we're like, hey, it's time to heal, to actually dive deep.
Yeah. What are some things that have come up so far in the healing process?
So much, honestly. Getting to understand that, yes, we create the reality that we live, but that also that programming that's installed in us at such an early age becomes so habitual, we don't recognize it as programming because it's habit. Our body just naturally does it. So for me, chaos was comfort because chaos is all I've known. Up until the age of even 18, even honestly, even beyond, there was always some sort of chaos, some sort of trauma, some sort of turmoil, something happening or something brewing. And so whenever things like level out and life gets good, it's unsettling, it's uncomfortable. And that's just a natural response. And so what I've learned about myself as of recent is that actually because I'm addicted to chaos, I'm addicted to turmoil, I create it through my own thoughts. And your thoughts and your feelings create your current state of being, right? Mm-hmm. So I've learned that I have to literally reprogram so much. And it's been I don't even want to use the word overwhelming. It's a lot, but it's been so beautiful of a journey because as I've gone through the system and as I've gone through the mental health journeys, as I've better understood myself, from a way of I'm not just a foster child or I'm not just a label or I'm not just a statistic. I've had to kind of reshift the thinking of I'm not healed either. And once you finally, I always say knowledge is power. I've said that since I can even begin to explain, but knowledge of self is self-empowerment. And that's where I'm shifting. I'm trying to better understand that programming, where I come from, why I'm this way, why I have these negative thoughts that trigger, and of course it all circles back to because I need chaos, because you become addicted to it, because it's all you know. And so reprogramming that it's been a journey, girl. It has been a journey, but it's been empowering beyond belief because now as I go in and I pour into not only foster youth, but also individuals in my daily life, I can bring that up and be like, hey, there's something deeper to this. And maybe you're actually having that because we need to look into like why you're feeling that way. Where does that root that stem from? And well, that's just the savior complex that I'm also working to heal, but it's one step at a time. But obviously we have to know before we can begin to grow. So
yeah, you're in partnership right now, right? Romantic partnership?
Not anymore.
Okay. I'm sorry. I'm just going off Instagram right now.
Yeah.
Okay. So you have a kid.
I do have a child.
A biological. Is it biological kid?
Yes.
And how old is he?
He turned 2 a couple weeks ago,
God,
2 weeks
so
ago.
Cute. I love the photos you post.
Thank you. It has been a whirlwind, girl.
Okay. I want to talk about this. You're a mom.
I'm a mom.
How old are you?
I'm 20. So I'll be 26 on December 19th.
Okay.
So,
and you are mature 26-year-old.
Yes.
I would say.
Honestly, I've lived so much life. I feel like, especially as I start to write my books, it's been so interesting because I'll find how everything has come full circle, and I like laugh about it because I'm like, oh wow, that fits so perfectly, or that storyline is great. And it's like, oh wait, no, that's your life. But even though I feel like I've lived so many different lifetimes and I've, have disconnected or disassociated with that version of myself who was going through that trauma or experiencing that, I feel like my life didn't really begin until I had my son. But that's not how I felt while I was pregnant. While I was pregnant, I was terrified. I was so scared because I had been shown love. First, I had been shown what it was to not feel loved because my biological mother did not connect with any of her children. And then I was adopted and poured into, and then immediately abandoned and rejected for a man. And then I was kind of tossed around, and I never really got to see what parenting looked like, or pouring in or loving someone looked like, or even understand what that meant. So it's like, how am I going to do this for a child? Like how, what do I do? And so my entire pregnancy, I'm like reading and, researching, and what do I do? And how do you be a mom? And what, I need to be perfect. And then the day that they placed him in my arms, it was like, oh, wait, you just do. You just go, you just flow, and you just love. And he was my passion. He was my fuel. I had really led astray. So that's why I started doing the entrepreneurial work, getting my real estate license, doing a lot of real estate investments, getting and working with investors, creating and establishing businesses, and keeping it pushing. And then I had my son, and I was like, oh, wait, hold on, backtrack. What are you called to do? Because getting to see that child, that helpless, beautiful soul who is just fresh and new, and you get to pour into him and essentially mold this baby, it reminded me of myself and where I had come from. And I was like, there are so many children out there who are suffering, and my story can make a difference. And so he really helped relight that flame inside of me to get back on track and continue on my passion piece. And so now we're here today.
I love it. Growing up, what are 3 things that you wish that you heard?
Number 1 is what I told that little girl when she came up to me and she said, I don't want an ice cream. Can we just get my baby sister a water? I looked at her after I gave her ice cream and her sister her water and ice cream. And I said, it is beautiful what you're doing. You are amazing. You are so powerful, and you are so giving. But please don't forget to give to yourself and to love yourself just as much. Because I struggle with that now. I don't even know what self-love looks like or means. And I'm on that journey of understanding of how to give to me, how to fill my cup first before I fill anyone else's. And so that's number 1 for sure. And getting to pour that into that little girl at Disney was beyond, there's almost a healing piece to it, because I was almost speaking to little Aliscia, right? Number 2, I would remind myself to celebrate my wins. I would want someone to remind me to celebrate the victories, because even to this day, as much as I've accomplished and as much as I've gone through and as much as I've overcome, I forget to sit in that moment and allow myself to recognize the beauty of what I've done, despite the adversity, despite the trauma, despite the abuse. And I don't ever enjoy it in that moment. And I guess there's beauty of like sitting still and like being able to slow down and just celebrate you. And then number 3, I would say this is probably my top tier one. Maybe it should have been number 1, but we'll save the best for last, right? My number 3 would be that strength doesn't look one way. Strength doesn't mean that you never cry. Strength doesn't mean that you're never sad or depressed or sorrowful, or that you're just consistently able to get up and keep it going. That strength looks different for everybody, and that you continuing to get up every day, and you continuing to move forward, and you continuing to make sure that progress is progress no matter how big or no small, that's strength. Despite what you're going through. The strength comes whenever you choose to take responsibility for the trauma that you endured, because there's healing that has to come for it. And that you don't have to be this strong, abundant woman, because this poised, precious, like great speaker that you see, that's because I created her. That way society would listen. Because I was never heard, I was never seen. I was rejected from the beginning. I was abandoned from the beginning, and I was called a liar for so long that it was like, okay, what does society need from me? How do I have to present myself to be heard? How do I have to be? And so it was almost like a personality developed in order for society rather than to be my raw, real, crazy, spontaneous, funky self. Yes, I integrate her. Yes, I have, I love people and I'm just abundantly happy all the time. But there is sides of me that maybe aren't so poised and polished that I don't allow to come out on stage, or I don't allow whenever I'm mentoring foster youth to connect. But it's like, they're like, hey, but be real. Like, let's, and so I just wish someone would say like, hey, strength doesn't mean what society means it. And that's everything, right? Goodness gracious. That's a whole nother talk for another day.
How do you feel connecting to your emotions that are quote unquote bad or unpleasant?
That honestly, that's a loaded question. I feel like what is bad and what is good? And I think that that's kind of where I've circled back to as I've begun this journey, because even for me, growing up in chaos, in a moment when you're developing what is right and what is wrong, the wrong was so prevalent in my life, but I had to feel good in it in order to keep going, that I kind of had those two things mixed up. Where, like I said, my chaos was my comfort, and that was the reality that I choose. So even in relationships, that was hard because, goodness gracious, I look great in the color red, and I obviously am like a bull attracted to it like crazy. And I would run towards the red flags because that's all I knew. To me, that was what was good. That was what was right because that was what I knew. And so that's why I asked that question, like, what is bad and what is good? Because I think that within yourself, you have to come to terms with that, what that looks like in a way that society can't really construe for you. Because if it is good for you, then it is good. Of course, there's always, we come down to the moral basis of right and wrong, yes. But when you've gone through so much trauma and adversity, there's almost a reprogramming that you have to do in order to really obtain that definition. So that's where I'm at, girl. Okay. I'm there. I'm on the journey. All that to say, I'm there. I'm moving forward through that. I'm trying to accept white flags, or like not white, I guess like green flags. We'll call them green flags. Yeah. Trying to like go away from the red flags, even though they're always in vision. And I'm like, hey, I know you're safe, or you feel safe, which is so crazy. But I just accredit that back to, that's when you know, and when that's all you know, that's just what you know. And so working through that. Stay tuned.
What have some of your relationship patterns been? I mean, you say chaos, but was there anything specific, like the person was emotionally unavailable, or you felt like you had to fix them, anything like that?
Yes, probably. You can like just look up like red flags in a dictionary, and that's like what it's like what I attract. And it's so crazy because it's just what I know, but also emotionally unavailable guys tend to gravitate towards me because I am so loving and so giving, and I'm so pouring that I do that because I have to win you over. I have to win your love. And I think I've been so used to my entire life people abandoning me, or me having to prove myself to be worthy of people's love, that it made sense then that in a relationship, if I'm having to prove myself, or if I'm having to validate, what I'm doing, then that was normal. And so, yes, definitely emotionally unavailable men. I have had really good relationships with secure, very just loving, giving guys. And I run the other way very quickly. I stay for a little bit because I'm like, oh, wait, this feels good. This is nice. And then I'm like, I do my little antics of, let's start some chaos. Let's brew something. And then whenever they don't respond how they should, or negatively, when they're like, oh yeah, let's talk this through, I'm like, oh, you know what? I gotta go. I need the red flag back. And so I'm trying to work through a lot of those patterns because I recognize it now. And I also would say that a big pattern of mine is the need and desire for love from a man came so early, because I always thought that I had daddy issues, but I'm realizing that it was mommy issues. And that's been a shift, because it was so confusing that I didn't gravitate, or I didn't move away from men because of my abuse. I felt like safe, or maybe like, I guess that emotionally unavailable men felt safe. And I needed to be filled. I needed my cup to be filled by love. Like my identity was in a man, or in finding love from a man. And I struggled with girl relationships for the longest time, which is so weird because I'm such a girl's girl. I'm like female empowerment. Let's do this. Like, let's get it. But then when it came to like friendships and bonding, I'm like, okay, but what are you about to do to me? Or like, when is that snake coming out? Or like, when is she going to be, you know what I mean? Like, I always had like my protection up. And now I'm recognizing that's because I had mommy issues. Probably a little bit of both, but I guess all of that to say, like, I got out of one relationship and just immediately went into the next and into the next, constantly finding that. But it was always through emotionally unavailable people. And I was really bad at abandoning the guys who were bad for me, because I felt like if I walked away, I was being just as bad by abandoning them, because I wasn't there to see them through their pain.
What are the emotions that come up when a man shows up available for you? Is it fear? Is it boring? I mean, that's a thing.
No, for sure. And I think that kind of circles back to what I said earlier about like being addicted to chaos. And that's a thing. Like, it's a real, like, it's chemically, like, you just need it, you know?
Your nervous system.
Yes. Mm-hmm. I think that at first it always feels really good. And then within the first like week, I'm like, okay, that's nice. This is great, but what's coming next? And so there was always that thought of what's around the corner, or what's, you know, something has to happen, or you have to have a bad trait, or you have to, you know, what's in your phone, you know, and then they unlock it for you and they handed it to you and you're like, okay, so then what did you delete? Or like, you know, you're always like looking for that bad thing. But I would say my personal emotions that I would feel are, first, I'm like, this is great. And then second, I'm like, okay, I think boring is the way to put it, but almost like an addict who's having a withdrawal, like, wait, I need chaos. I need something to happen. Something like, this can't be right. This is too good to be true, right? That like, that stereotypical, like, there's no way this is real. And then looking back at all of those, I'm like, wait, no, he was just a good guy. Mm-hmm. And that's, you know, but working through those feelings and those emotions aren't easy because it's uncomfortable. And I think my last healthy relationship with my NASA boy, we call him, not only was I not ready, but I didn't even see that it was good, because my good and my bad were swapped. So that question, now that I am fast forward 4 years, 5 years, and it's like, oh, what is bad? What is good? And it's time to reprogram and reset, because you have to come to baseline and come to terms with what has programmed those concepts for you before you can do anything. Because we create that reality that we live in, girl. And whenever we're used to bad, we're going to keep creating it, you know?
Totally.
So I feel like that's kind of the emotions that I'm feeling now versus then, is like, I'm trying to be more analytical about, hey, how did I get here?
Okay.
Let's reprogram. Let's start from the scratch. Let's start from ground zero level, like, and work our way up. And I'm so excited about the Hoffman Institute. I think that's going to be everything. Stay tuned. I'm going to be calling.
I will. Yes. Well, I want you to come back on. I love talking to you. I love hearing your story. Can I share some thoughts?
Yes,
absolutely. I've had to learn to, because I don't want to be like my mom. She would just always give unsolicited advice and thoughts. And I'd be like, I didn't ask you, but
yes.
But just listening to you, because I've gone through, everyone's story is different, obviously. My own healing and things like that before meeting my husband. And we have actually a lot of the same pain points of abandonment, of feeling like I needed to earn love, things like that. And through all the different healing modalities that I've experienced, the analytical and understanding, it helps a lot. I think it helps a lot. But what has been the most impactful for me, especially I think if you're a high achiever and you like those gold stars and things like that, is the feeling, which is the scariest part. It was, for me, it was so uncomfortable. And also a lot of times, like, I never even knew what I was feeling because I wasn't brought up in that way. My coping mechanisms were, I'm avoidant. And so as a kid, I would just always shut down and so disconnected. And in recent years, I've done healing, and then like things continue to happen in life, right? So pandemic, I was like feeling numb for a while, and it's almost like survival mechanisms. Pandemic's here, let me write a book. Let me, be productive. To the point where it's not until recently actually that it's starting to come out. Like, I'm so disconnected from how I feel. I keep reaching for things. Like right now I'm working more with Asians in entertainment. I'm like, let me write my script, get my movie, do.
but to the point I'm like, is this working for me? And I could feel the emotions as before we started recording. I was telling Aliscia, I'm like, I might cry. I've been feeling some sort of way. These things are just coming up, and I might not even fully understand what exactly is triggering me in this moment. You know, is it what we're talking about, or is it this? But I just know the emotions are dormant and they're here. And the times in my life they have come out, whether it's in therapy, whether it's actually getting to the point where I have the fight with the person, because I always want to be together, right? Like I'm self-aware. I'm better than having, you know, like a unconscious conversation with someone where I just lash out. And recently it's been happening. I've been lashing out, and it's usually like my family, you know, because they trigger you the most. I'm like, who is this person? But that's the thing is we're all human, and that's a part of it. And I've always have felt that the gem is in feeling those emotions. So to not forget about doing that in addition to the analytical and knowledge.
I actually appreciate that more than you know, because where I'm at right now in my life, as I'm going through therapy, my therapist is constantly like, I stay busy and I stay doing things because that's been my coping mechanism. Yes, the gold star is great. The achievement is great. But in the midst of the chaos, if I can, yes, you're right. If I can just do something or stay busy, then I don't have to feel. Then I don't have to think or process, because I'm putting my emotion, putting that energy into something that I can succeed in. And then I get the gold star, and then I feel good. And then that surface, you know, that just like covers up the bad. But it's important to feel that. And I think that what we've been talking about with my previous relationship is that where I'm at now is I put up with more than I should have, because I refuse to allow myself to feel or to even trust myself to feel. Because as a child, when I was being abused every morning, I wasn't allowed to lash out. I wasn't allowed to yell or scream or say stop or even say no, because I was doing it to protect my siblings. And I was suppressing or depressing my feelings and my emotions. And so that's a pattern that I've created. And so now we're working on it of like feeling. And girl, she was telling me the other day, she's like, if you feel guilty, that's good, because that means you're doing something right. And, you know, I'll tell people no, or I'll express like a certain emotion and a certain feeling. And I'm like, wait, I'm so sorry that I said that way. And they're like, no, I needed to hear that. I'm like, okay, good. But not knowing or having to suppress the anger. Like there is healthy anger, I'm learning. You know, I am so big into Dr. Joe Dispenza right now and so deep into Dr. Gabor Mate.
Yes.
And I'm like,
both of them
no
too.
way. Okay, good. I'm like, then you know. I'm like, I'm so deep in there. I'm like, okay, cool. Be angry. And then it comes up and I'm like, wait, how do you do this? Like, because we've created that wall, but I'm like, no, you just need to feel. And it almost is scary.
It's very scary to be vulnerable, like, and it's uncomfortable if you're not used to it.
Yes, and that's why you know, everything I post and everything I say, and people are always like, girl, I needed to hear that. I'm like, yeah, me too. You know, I'm like, I'm saying this because I need to hear it just as much as like, we have to be comfortable being uncomfortable. And while I've lived in a state of uncomfort to other people in society who look at my story and they're like, that's horrible. That's so uncomfortable. Well, that was comfort for me. And so now I'm having, I guess, to like swap them and be like, not uncomfortable being comfortable. And it's just, that comes with me having to feel. And goodness gracious, isn't it crazy? We live in a society where it's easier, which I mean, we are so distracted. Oh my gosh, it's so easy not to feel.
Like, oh yeah, now with the phones to go, like the numbing, it's way easier to get that dopamine hit opening up social media and you start scrolling.
No, absolutely. And the validation that you need or anything that you're seeking in a different kind of way. But that's why everything I use it for is like, let's just shift some perspectives. Like, let's change some narratives. You know, that's why. And I think that I've been doing things that kind of help trigger the questions or trigger thoughts or trigger like, you know, everyone's always like, you're wearing your snake earrings all the time. And I'm like, yes, because I love the questions that come from it. Or I love the feeling of someone saying like, oh, someone asked the other day we were talking about feelings and emotions, and they were like, okay, our spirit animals are really big about this because, you know, if you identify as a cat, like cats are very just like mellow and chill and they do their own thing. So they asked everyone in the room, what's your spirit animal? And I was like, oh, my spirit animal is definitely a snake. Oh my God. The response was overwhelming and not in a positive way. But I had to explain, it's like snakes literally every single year with every new season. They have to adapt, they change, they shed their skin, and they become someone entirely new. And I've had to do that my entire life. Yes, I have done bad. Yes, I have done good. But the bad that I did was for survival. And that's all a snake is doing as well. When it bites, it's out of survival to make sure that it can still live to see the next day. There's nothing that that creature is doing that is not instinctively or natural to just survive. And I feel like foster kids have such a bad connotation and a bad narrative to them, or can be seen as troubled foster youth. And it's so easy to label us as such, when really we're just doing whatever we have to do to survive. And we do shed our skin and we do become new. And there's so much beauty in that. There's so much beauty in all of that. But where I'm circling back to is like being able to recognize the pain and being able to remember to feel that part too. I tell my story all the time. And it just has become that, a story. It's no longer associated with me. I've disconnected or disassociated from those feelings. That's why I'm excited about Hoffman, because they're like, oh, you're going to feel. And I'm like, I don't know how. They're like, oh, we're going to teach you how. And I'm like, great. Okay. But there's so much importance, and it's so vital to do that. And even, you sharing like, I'm going through this right now and I don't know if I'm going to cry or what I'm going to do. It's like, I'm so excited to get back to a place where you can just allow yourself to feel, and I think that kind of circles back to the strength thing. I think I didn't feel or cry or do anything or show that because it's like, no, I'm strong.
Well, you had to be to take care of your younger siblings.
Yes.
Right. Do you have a relationship with them now?
So after I came out about the abuse, the way of punishing me was to brainwash my siblings to believe that I was actually this crazy, psychotic girl who ruined their family, put their dad in jail. They refused to tell my siblings they were adopted or to tell them what actually happened. And so that was really hard for me, because that's what I was told by my abuser for so many years. If you tell anybody, you're going to lose your siblings. And then it came to fruition. And the fact that it came to fruition by my mother's hand, by his wife's hand, by the woman who didn't protect me's hand, rather than by my abuser, that's why I'm like, mommy issues, #, that's what I got. But now they have slowly started to integrate their way back into my lives. First of, feelings of hatred and why did you do this? And, you're the devil. And then me being able to say, just taking the beating like I always have, and then being able to offer advice and proof. And the proof is in the pudding, and getting to send all of the documentations, because girl, I kept all the receipts. I kept every single one of them. That way when this day came, I could. And so the relationship is still building, and they're still learning to trust me, because brainwashing at that early of an age is hard to kind of circle back to or get out of. But they've both become parents, and I think that has began their journey of what is the truth behind the matter. And so they both reached out to me in different times, and we're working through that. It's so hard because when I see them or when I think about them, I think about these children that I was protecting, my babies. And so now to see them with kids and grown and graduated, I was there for them through everything, even whenever they didn't know. Showed up to their graduations, was at all of their basketball games. Anything that they were involved in, I made sure to go, but I was always behind the scenes. And now they're circling back to me, and it has been interesting to navigate that terrain. But it's been a journey. And a beautiful one, but it was definitely, I guess I haven't allowed myself to feel that anger, let's just say it, for being essentially having that time taken and ripped away from me by a woman, and that the system didn't protect me, and the system didn't step up and say she has to be given time with her siblings, or she needs to be allowed. Because in the beginning, before I was adopted, we had visitation is what they call it. And then pretty soon after, my aunt basically started saying that the kids just didn't want to come. Well, as I've started to reconnect with them, it was actually the matter of she didn't want to take them because the brainwashing began. And so we're working through a lot of those conversations, and it's been really interesting to navigate. It's a new part, but it's just part of the testimony. It's part of the journey, and I'll be able to help others who have also maybe gone through that same experience. And that's all that life is. So we do. It's a relationship is kindling. So stay tuned. Again, stay tuned.
Is there anything you would like people to know about foster youth?
They are the most resilient, abundantly strong, bulletproof people you will ever meet. Even in their sorrows, even in their depth of turmoil and pain, they have to keep moving. They have to keep going forward. And I think that with just the slightest bit of validation, of upliftment, of empowerment, they become powerhouses. They become me. This is what happens. The proof is in the pudding. We literally are the most powerful group of individuals that you'll ever meet. But the statistics, the narrative, the perspective on us is so negative. How could we step into that light if our story is already written for us? And so if there's anything that I can say is that if you've ever been around, or even if you have the idea or even the thought of fostering or getting involved or volunteering or adopting in general, pour into that child, because that validation goes a long way, even from the smallest of trickles of love. I can tell you story after story after story about people who, in a moment when I was ready to give up, or in a moment when I was feeling suicidal, or whenever I was feeling so down I could not move, someone interjected and just poured a little bit of love into my life. And that's all it took for me to keep going. And each drop into the ocean creates that tsunami of change for that child. And then they can be a powerhouse. But it's just shifting that perspective. And it starts with the perspective of individuals who aren't foster youth. That way we can redirect that energy that they're feeling, because they are superhumans. We are literally superhumans. We are propelled into a state of wisdom at an age that no one has ever known. But if we're given the love, that's why the Allie view is so big, because changing that view, giving them a new view of themselves and perspective of what it means to be a foster child doesn't have to be negative. Once that happens, it's game over.
Thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story. I want to hear more. I want to volunteer more, and I will. I'll see you at future Foster Love events. Yes. If anyone would like to reach out to you, how can they do that?
So you can find me on Instagram. It's the.ali, ali.vue. That's the easiest way to get a hold of me. That's where I stay. That's where I spend my time.
All of us. Awesome. Thank you so much.
Yes. Thank you so much for having me.